Number 10. Johnny Storm and the Thing. For almost no reason whatsoever, these two have had a rivalry on and off in the comics. Why? No one really knows. Their fighting and arguing comes in the form of trading insults, with Grimm often threatening to kill Johnny. Jeez. The two prank each other and Johnny berates Grimm, calling him ugly, while Grimm calls Johnny stupid. The two have quite the rivalry. Granted, this most likely comes from a loving place, where they consider one another to be like brothers. But the strangest part is that despite all their fighting and bickering, they seem to have almost no fights between them when Johnny starts dating Grimm's ex, Alicia, while he is away. Strange feud indeed. Number 9. Wolverine and Cyclops. You may be thinking, but everyone understands this rivalry. Wolverine and Cyclops are just polar opposites. No wonder they fight so much. Sure, this is true, but it's not usually their differences that bring the duo to blows. It's their similarities. Namely that they are often both in love with the same woman. While their love for Jean Grey is as old as time, they even at one point fought over Emma Frost, which seems like it's a bit much. It seems like these two honestly just want to fight each other no matter what. Is it possible that they are not even jealous of the affections of the woman they're fighting over, but the affection that the woman receives from the other? Two dudes fighting as much as Summers and Logan makes you really want to know why. And if there is some tension to ship between them, I know I certainly would ship it. There's gotta be some love under all that hate. Number 8. Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. For a team and family of mutants, the members of the X-Men sure fight a lot. Though Emma Frost was admittedly part of Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, and longtime enemy to the X-Men, so it is understandable of Kitty Pryde to be hesitant to trust her. But after Emma reformed, she didn't want to continue to not get along with Kitty. She actually was the first to extend the olive branch, offering Kitty a place at her school. Kitty, however, was still holding a grudge and refused. This led to Emma waging all-out war on Shadowcat, which seems kind of intense. I get that the two already had a hard time getting along, but someone not wanting to sign up for your school does not mean that you should all out aim to destroy them. Little overkill there, Emma. Number 7. Robin and Robin. When it comes to the Bat family, there are quite a few feuds to be had, unsurprisingly. I mean, hey, it's a big family. Still, I think one of the most dramatic was the one between Tim Drake and Damian Wayne. Initially, when these two met, they seemingly got off on the wrong foot, and Tim kinda wanted to try to offer an olive branch. This came in the form of offering to spar with young Damian, with Tim promising to take it easy on him. However, everything quickly went awry when Damian revealed that earlier in the night he'd actually killed a criminal, the Spook, taking his head. The two ended up fighting, and Damian knocks out Robin's Tim Drake, leaving him bleeding on the floor of the Batcave, and donning a version of his costume when he goes to confront his father, letting him know that he is ready to replace Tim as Robin. Batman ends up returning and retrieving Tim, helping to fix up the damage that Damian did to him. Eventually, these two would move past this feud, but for a while there, it was basically life-threatening. Number 6. Daredevil and Punisher. Daredevil and the Punisher are usually seen to be friends and allies, but because of their difference in opinions when it comes to how best to handle superheroic issues, they are sometimes known to be rivals of one another as well. This element of their relationship is especially highlighted in the Netflix Daredevil series, where we are first introduced to this world's live-action representation of the Punisher. Here, Matt Murdock disagrees with Punisher's tactics, believing he should not kill his enemies or people who get in his way of tracking down his true enemies, whereas the Punisher believes the people he kills deserve it. Although both see the other as a hero of sorts, there are times when they look down on one another or condemn them for their methods. In fact, Frank Castle has likely thought before that Daredevil is not harsh enough when it comes to the way that he doles out justice. Number 5. Zatanna and Catwoman. Oh boy, does Catwoman have reason to have beef with Zatanna. These two ended up in a fight with one another after it was revealed that Catwoman may have only become a full-fledged hero as a result of Zatanna manipulating her mind. Because of this revelation, Catwoman turned on Zatanna, with the two getting into a physical fight. In the end, Selina was rightly pissed at Z after learning this, feeling like she had never in her life been more violated than she was when Zatanna changed her against her will. It also made Catwoman question whether or not she was actually the hero she had become at this point, since she'd obviously had no choice in that matter. What a terrible thing to do to someone. Number 4. Jean Grey and Emma Frost. A feud that feels as old as time, really, or at least almost as old as Emma Frost's character. Initially, this feud started because Emma was a villain in the comics, being the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. This made her a rival to not just Jean, but also all of the X-Men. Emma was actually introduced around the time of the Dark Phoenix saga too, and was one of those present and involved when Mastermind took Jean and brainwashed her into joining the Hellfire Club as its Black Queen. Of course, This wasn't really Jean, but the Phoenix, who had taken on Jean's likeness, both in personality and in appearance. What really caused these two women to dislike one another though took place when Emma had reformed and become a hero. And that happened mainly as a result of Emma having a psychic affair with Jean's husband, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, during a time when their marriage was strained. Hence the feud. Number 3. Superman and the Flash. For some reason, Superman has this crazy obsession with beating the Flash at his own thing, being fast. Well, you may think I'm exaggerating here. I mean, there have been a few times where Superman actually just wanted to catch Flash because he was being mind controlled, or, was going to run to his death, or needed some sense talked into him. I can guarantee you that there are many panels and instances that point to the fact that Superman just really wants to be faster. He has also had countless foot races with countless Flashes, and almost every time he's either tied or lost, with more losses than ties. Yet even though they have been racing since the 60s, in 2011, Superman is chasing Barry Allen's Flash in Superman issue 709, and is still seen wondering to himself in a panel, which of them is faster? Give it up, Superman, it's not you. Quit trying to take this one thing away from the Flash. You have a million other things you're superior at. Jeez. Number 2. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. Are you surprised by this one? I know I am. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier have something in common, beyond both being superheroes. Super, in Hawkeye's case. They are both exes of Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow. The two are pulled together in the Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye and the Winter Soldier series to track down whoever is killing Natasha's old enemies, following Black Widow's death. It is clear from the way they interact that they do not want to be working together, that they do not trust each other, and that they actually hate each other. While I get it that trying to get along with your ex's ex is probably pretty weird, what I do not get is that they later reveal that they have kind of always hated one another. Which means this feud predates their time dating Natasha? What? But why? So this rivalry is kind of based around them sharing an ex, but also just based around, I guess, them both existing. Number 1. Wolverine and Deadpool. These two have a long-standing rivalry for almost no reason. They often fight just to fight. At one point in the comics, Deadpool fights Wolverine because a doctor prescribed him to fight a superhero to help fix his hallucinations. Another brutal fight they have ends with Wolverine offering to buy Deadpool a beer. Mostly, these two fight just because they can. They both have insane regeneration factors, which means they can usually take the fight as far as they want and make it as violent as they desire, and still both be fine. It is a really strange relationship. Of course, Deadpool does take it far enough to kill Wolverine when he brings a carbon-atium sword to take him on when he kills the entire Marvelverse. But don't worry, that death is not part of the main continuity. Wolverine is fine. Beyond this, there is also the hilarious rivalry that translated weirdly to the X-Men Wolverine Origins film, and beyond that, the Deadpool movies, where Deadpool just enjoys poking fun at Logan. I suspect the two might actually secretly be BFFs.
Number 10. Batman and Green Lanterns. I don't know about you guys, but I have always sort of loved how Batman and various different Green Lanterns just kind of never get along. Actually, he has this weird thing against Green Arrow as well. I'm thinking maybe Bruce just hates the color green in general. No, it usually has more to do with the attitudes and personalities of the individuals themselves. So, for example, Batman and Guy Gardner had a pretty obvious disdain for each other when they were both part of Justice League International, and it eventually led to Batman straight up punching the lights out of Guy Gardner. Now, to be fair, no one likes Guy Gardner, he's just kind of the worst. Even the rest of the Justice League International were like, yeah, that guy needs to shut up. And they all left for their mission after Batman knocked him out, just leaving him laying there on the floor. There was also the time Hal Jordan came back to life after the little parallax thing happened, and Batman did not trust this guy one bit. Batman kept getting in the way of Hal, who was trying to actually go and defeat Parallax properly. In this case, it was Hal who did the punching, and Batman kinda deserved it, but he still got his comeuppance for that one. Also, when the Justice League came together for the first time in the newer continuities, I think after New 52, Batman was just like a little sneaky prankster to Hal and stole the power ring off him just to be like, I'm better than you. It's kind of hilarious. Batman has also scolded Green Lantern Simon Baz for carrying a Blam Blam, and he's had shouting matches and beat the snot out of Green Arrow for speaking up against Batman. It's a bit of a lighter rivalry, but I swear he's got something against the color green. I think it's a fact. Number 9. Aquaman and Black Manta. While Aquaman has two major villains with Ocean Master and Black Manta, the latter of the two just goes the extra sadistic step with this villainy. Black Manta is a man who will go into and come out of retirement based on whether Aquaman is around or not, and the rivalry has just gotten more and more personal for them both over the years. In fact, it kind of rivals all other rivalries, but it is Aquaman, and as much as we all love Jason Momoa, Aquaman, it just ain't that cool, man. He just ain't that cool. He has been, I don't deny it, and the Aquaman stans are going to come at me for this one, but if you like him, let me know in the comments and give me 3 reasons why that don't stem from the fact that everybody hates on him. But back to the point, Aquaman was convinced that Black Manta was responsible for the passing of Aquaman's dad. And he very well might have been, but Arthur's quest for vengeance on that one brought about the accidental end of Manta's dad, so of course Manta needed his revenge, and so he pitted Aquaman against Aqualad by trapping Arthur's wee bab in a bubble of air, causing it to suffocate if the Aqua allies didn't duke it out. And even though they totally did duke it out, it didn't stop anything. And then, even later on, Aquaman even took on Manta's son as a protege, which is like a huge insult to the villain who is arguably your #1 rival. That part was actually kind of cool. I'll give Aquaman that one. That one thing that you did was kind of cool. Also when you had the hook for your arm, that was cool too. Number 8. Black Lightning and Tobias Whale. Black Lightning simply does not get enough love, but his comics and even the show are actually pretty cool. His main rival, Tobias Whale, was the leader of the gang called the 100, and Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning, decided that he was going to become pretty outspoken against this group, which prompted Whale to take out one of Pierce's students. This is what created Black Lightning in the first place, but it wasn't the only beef the two shared. Pretty much like Aquaman, Whale had a large hand in the passing of Pierce's dad. After a while, the rivalry would actually travel over to Gotham City, where Tobias decided to try and establish himself there, and he and his gang were a bit too much for Black Lightning, who had to call on Superman for help, which I also think is kind of lame. He could have definitely handled it on his own. But I mean, where Black Lightning called on Superman, there was a time that Tobias called on a demonic entity, so I mean, tit for tat, I guess. If you haven't already, be sure to drop a like on this video if you like it. Your support really helps us out. Also, we have another video that goes over some of Marvel's biggest rivalries as well, so definitely check that out.
Number 6. Wally West and Kyle Raynor. These two heroes are both ones that adopted mantles. Wally West became the Flash after Barry Allen, and Kyle Raynor replaced Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. The pair consistently mock one another and often try to debase each other, criticizing one another left, right, and center. This feud started as soon as the two pretty much met, and stems from the fact that they simply think the other is just not good enough to replace the former hero who wore the costume previously. Which is interesting because almost everyone else thinks that they both do a good job. Rather than just accept that they are both doing their best and both good in different ways, they choose to bicker and compete at every opportunity they get. Like little kids, these two. Number 5. Bishop and Gambit. This duo have also butt heads ever since they first met. Bishop comes from a future where the X-Men have perished after being betrayed by one of their own, and mutants were put into concentration camps. I said that like I didn't know I wrote it, but I just felt like it sounded harsh. He met a man called the Witness who refused to give his name and claimed to know the story of the X-Men, saying that he was the last one to see them alive. He also went by LeBeau, and it was his similarity to Gambit that instantly made Bishop hate and not trust him. While I understand Bishop's reaction, he just continued to not trust Gambit for pretty much forever. Even when the two are forced to work together, he continued to insult and berate Gambit, often putting both of them at risk due to ignoring Gambit's suggestions while on missions, just because they came from him. I also really don't think that the Witness was the traitor. This is a silly grudge because it is based on so many assumptions. Number 4. Reed and Neymar. Cyclops and Wolverine may be fighting over Jean, but it is this fight over a paramour that really takes the cake. Oftentimes when I bring up Neymar, I put him in either category, villain or superhero. In truth, he's really an anti-hero, but he has a few times been an interesting nemesis to the Fantastic Four, or at the very least, Reed Richards. Neymar is head over heels in love with Susan Storm, which has put the two at odds, with Richards often presented as Sue's savior, and Neymar the awful brute from the sea, who is coming to carry her away. But not always. Sometimes Susan seems to actually want to be with Neymar, and with a neglectful husband like Reed Richards, I can't really say that I blame her. Neymar and Susan have shared a few kisses and long romantic looks, but in the end she always comes back to Reed.
Number 3. Shazam and Black Adam. If you think about it, the feud between these two magic powerhouses is probably the longest in the Earth's history. It goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and the fun part here is that while Black Adam has done some truly horrible and villainous things, he's not really considered to be as much of a villain as some of the other villains who are on this list. He has still massacred an entire country for no reason, but yeah, definitely an anti-hero, for sure. Black Adam fights for the oppressed and is a champion for his people, but he will use any means necessary to do that. When he became the champion of the wizard Shazam, Black Adam's methods caused the wizard to trap the champion in an amulet. Now it took centuries for the wizard to choose a new champion, and that was Billy Batson. This didn't happen though until a man would betray and end the lives of Billy's parents so that he could reawaken Black Adam. So now, the wizard's old violent champion and his new heroic one are on Earth at the same time, and Black Adam ain't too happy about that, going to incredibly sadistic lengths to try and stop Billy, who is one of the few characters that can actually oppose and stop Black Adam at all. And he has on multiple occasions, just growing the hatred between the two of them. Coming in at number 2, Superman and Lex Luthor. Let's be honest, with only 2 spots left on this list, most people knew what was coming here. While Brainiac is an incredibly great villain for Superman, challenging the Man of Steel with his intelligence more than even this incredibly intelligent Lex Luthor can, Lex has a burning, unsated hatred for Superman, vast amounts of wealth, and an understanding of people's base instincts that allow him to top pretty much everyone else in Superman's rogues gallery. What's interesting is that he didn't start that way. He didn't hate Superman so intensely at first, but after years and years and years of having his plans specifically thwarted by Superman himself, he really just became the #1 thing that infuriated Lex beyond belief. The story, How Much Can One Man Hate, is actually a really good display of why Luthor absolutely abhors Kal-El. The story showed that Luthor's hatred for Superman was kind of born out of the praise and admiration that the Kryptonian received without ever needing to work really that hard for it. Of course, Lex orchestrated the events that took place in the Death of Superman story, with Lex taking down his arch-nemesis. Additionally, All-Star Superman saw their rivalry come to an end, with Superman being taken off the board yet again by Lex Luthor's schemes. Lex himself is probably one of the best villains in comic book history, but I think a lot of us would have a hard time saying that when we know about the villain of the #1 spot. And in #1, yeah, you probably guessed it, it's Batman and the Joker. These two are almost complete polar opposites. One stands for order, the other for chaos. One uses fear as a weapon against injustice, while the other turns laughter into the scariest thing you can possibly imagine. Batman is fueled by an idea, and the Joker has, well, basically no motivation at all, or that motivation changes depending on how he feels. Batman vows to preserve life while beating criminals to a pulp and leaving them in hospital beds, while the Joker almost always just leaves people without the ability to take another breath. This all started way back in 1951 when DC first introduced the Joker in The Man Behind the Red Hood. Before even becoming the Clown Prince of Crime, this unnamed man was on the run from Batman and leapt into a vat of acid, creating the Joker in the first place. So, honestly, Batman himself kinda created the Joker, like indirectly. There are some truly pivotal epic stories in DC Comics that involve this rivalry. The Killing Joke, The White Knight, The Dark Knight Returns, Batman Endgame, A Death in the Family, Death of the Family, Joker's 5-Way Revenge, 3 Jokers, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. All of them are highly recommended and show this rivalry at its peak. But in at #7 is Deathstroke and the Teen Titans. If you have watched the animated Teen Titans series, then you know their #1 most persistent villain is Deathstroke Slade Wilson. His cunning, intense, immoral way of completing his missions have made him incredibly hard to bring down, even compared to other massive threats the Titans face. But over time, guess what? Yes, that's right, it became hella personal. Deathstroke's son, Ravager, had his life ruined after Starfire crashed into his apartment, and then Ravager and Deathstroke fought the Titans together until Ravager passed away in his own dad's arms, which then compounded Deathstroke's hate for the Titans since he blamed them for it. And then we have the massive can of worms known as the Judas Contract. Here, the Titans welcome a new member onto the team who ends up being Rose Wilson, the daughter of Slade. She goes and betrays the team and takes up the Ravager moniker after her brother, and that also ended not very well. It's just a whole whack of hate composed in one person. Deathstroke. I'm talking about Deathstroke. Number 6, Superman and Brainiac. Finally, a rivalry that isn't predominantly fueled by personal tragedy. No, in this instance, the rivalry is just so good because it brings out a whole other side of the Man of Steel, his intelligent side. Whenever Superman goes up against Brainiac, his incredible strength begins to fall at the wayside. Brainiac has even beaten the Man of Steel a few times, and what's interesting is that Brainiac is actually the one here who has made a bunch of personal blows on the Man of Steel. Usually it's a bit more fair with heroes also making a few mistakes, but because Superman is DC's golden boy, we can't have him messing up too much now, can we? Or if he does, it had better be in an alternate storyline.
Brainiac shrank Kandor and Krypton and carried them around as part of his collection.
Another time Brainiac had Superman distracted, which opened the door for him to get at Jonathan Kent. Superman has teamed up with General Zod against Brainiac. It goes that far sometimes, but my absolute favorite Brainiac moment is probably one of his kind of smaller ones. It's actually in Superman Red Sun, but I'll let you check that out for yourself because I'm moving on. To number 5, Flash and Eobard Thawne. Things are definitely real when you will travel through time to not only fight your rival, but then travel through time again to change their entire reality. What's really weird here is that Eobard Thawne was actually a huge fan of the Flash, but being from the future, and because time just be like that sometimes, he surprisingly learned that the Flash's greatest villain, Reverse Flash, was Eobard Thawne himself, and then he made sure that this came to pass, kind of like a weird manifest destiny thing. He got powers similar to the Flash, went back in time, and worked alongside Wally West, pretending to be the Flash himself, Barry Allen. Thawne claims responsibility for taking down the Flash family. He destroyed Wally West's life, and probably the most pivotal Flash story, Flashpoint, involved Thawne and Barry battling through time, with Barry attempting to stop Thawne from taking the life of Nora Allen, Barry's mom, which caused a whole different reality to form, and Thawne observed the whole thing, mocking Barry pretty much the whole time. Eobard Thawne found out he was supposed to be a villain, and so he decided he was going to go extremely hard with that and be the most dastardly devil you ever did see. Number 4, Sinestro and Hal Jordan. Sinestro has a serious case of the jealousy. Throughout, Sinestro was considered to be the absolute best of the best that the Green Lantern Corps had to offer, and he was proud of that fact. He even trained the unlikely Hal Jordan to become a Green Lantern, but then Hal went and became the greatest Green Lantern, and that inspired no kindness from little old Sinestro. Nuh-uh-uh. Sinestro hated Hal to a degree. There was also this whole thing of opposing morals. Sinestro held a point that fear and deadly force were the best ways to improve not only the world, but the universe. And Hal helped Sinestro's own planet turn against him. And then, Sinestro was kicked out of the Green Lantern Corps. Instead, he literally forged the Yellow Power Ring and created the Yellow Lantern Corps itself, aka the Sinestro Corps. They have had some pretty damn intense battles, and Sinestro was pretty instrumental in that whole little parallax thing that we've talked about before. Now, I don't know about you guys, but Sinestro is also incredibly good at being a huge jerk to Hal, but all while being incredibly entertaining to read. Like, I'm definitely a fan of Sinestro over Hal Jordan, and I'm not afraid to say that.
Number 3, Batman and Superman. These two are often thought of as being the best of friends, and well, I mean, they are. But that doesn't mean that they don't have fights and that they don't have any beef with each other at any point. In fact, in some realities, the differences between them lead the two to become sworn enemies, as opposed to staying the best of friends. The best thing about these two heroes is in fact how different they both are to one another, and perhaps what has made their rivalry and friendship so strong throughout the years and throughout DC's multiverse is that they both see how much they are different from the other. In some cases, they deeply respect and admire the other's differences. In other cases, it actually leads them to try and break their once fellow colleague, unable to reconcile and accept the other's differences or mindset. Number 2, Iron Man and Captain America. This one feels like a feud as old as time. It's at least as old as these characters are. And in fact, while it does have a long history, it's still relevant today. Captain America and Iron Man clashed during the first Civil War, most iconically, but even recently have been seen at odds with one another following the events of AXE Judgment Day. While Captain America was deemed unworthy by the progenitor, Iron Man's Tony Stark was given a thumbs up instead, leaving the pair to bicker over the judgments and what they truly meant, if anything. During Judgment Day, issue number 6, Tony asked Cap after the event, "Are you okay?" with Cap responding, "No, and we shouldn't feel okay. It was a wake-up call. We should all pay attention and act." Tony clarifies, "No, I don't mean that. I meant me passing and you failing. That must be hard for you." Steve pointedly responds by saying, "You made the Celestial. It was based on you, and it tried to kill the Earth, and you're taking its opinion as meaning anything?" Once again and always, opposite sides. Number 1. Black Panther and Namor. While Iron Man and Captain America may have a more iconic feud in the comics and films, Black Panther and Namor have one that not only is between them, but also extends to their nation. And theirs has actually resulted in all-out war, not just in the superhero community, but in terms of their own countries as well. This feud actually started, as most do in comics, as a misunderstanding. But as a result of that, both of their peoples began to mistakenly attack one another, and Black Panther and Namor basically started to watch out for the other person. Eventually, it got to the point that they can no longer let bygones be bygones and talk it out. In the film Wakanda Forever, we see this feud making its way to the big screen, with tensions rising between Shuri's Black Panther and Namor of the Talokan, as well as, Wakanda and the Talokan. I feel like overall superhero rivalries are something that can be easily leveraged by villains to distract superheroes enough to give them the freedom they need to unleash their devious plots on the world. Number 10. Hulk and Thor. Hulk and Thor recently clashed in Donny Cates' crossover story between their two series, both of which he is currently penning. The story that he wrote with them duking it out is entitled Banner War. However, these two also have a long history of having beef in the comics, albeit pretty playful beef, I'd say. Their feud is similar in nature to that of Hulk's feud with the Thing. The question starting it all being who is really strongest between them. Thor likewise enjoys the challenge of taking on Hulk, and the two are seen as being pretty evenly matched. Though at the end of the day, I would actually still say that Hulk is stronger, as Hulk is known for being the strongest there is, after all. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern. Martian Manhunter was there when John Stewart's Green Lantern let an entire planet be destroyed as a result of his ego. The two were deployed to the planet in the hopes of saving it, but Green Lantern didn't feel that he actually needed Martian Manhunter's help and restrained him. Unfortunately, this proved to be a mistake, as when John found the bomb on the planet, it and the room that it was contained in was painted entirely yellow, preventing John from using his Green Lantern powers to do anything to destroy or defuse it. Yikes. As a result, the planet was destroyed, with only John and John surviving the explosion, leaving Martian Manhunter grossly disappointed in his colleague Green Lantern and his hubris. Number 8. Captain Marvel and Iron Man. This is a pretty ridiculous one considering how close these two were, but hey, Civil War II happened. It happened and we gotta acknowledge it. We can't ignore that. Carol and Tony used to be the best of friends, with Tony even using the nickname of Care Bear for Carol, a nickname that her BFF Jessica Drew aka Spider-Woman also often uses, so that means that they're pretty close. However, this didn't stop them from getting into it when Carol believed the best way to deal with crime was by fighting criminals before they even manifested as such. That was what Civil War II was basically all about. Basically, it was Minority Report. Captain Marvel believed that using the Inhuman Ulysses' visions to prevent crime was the best course of action, whereas Tony, oddly enough the voice of reason here, believed the best way to go about things was actually to wait until an actual crime happened, not trust in, as he saw it, unreliable visions. Enter Civil War II, which ended with Carol as pretty much a straight up unreasonable villain in the eyes of readers who punched Tony into a coma. Number 7. SpiderMan and Wolverine. SpiderMan and Wolverine have an even deeper rivalry, probably because they have even less in common, it would seem, on the outside than even the bizarre duo of Logan and Wade. Logan and Wade actually at least have some shared experience in acting as mercenaries and both having their heads scrambled by people, and they've both been known to behave like anti-heroes, whereas Spider-Man and Wolverine are almost kinda on two opposite sides when it comes to their approach to heroics. The one thing they seem to share, though, I will say, is that their heart is definitely both in the right place. But just like Daredevil and Punisher, and even more so perhaps, these two struggle to see eye to eye when it comes to their approach and ideology in regards to how best to be a superhero and their heroic tactics. Number 6. Hulk and Bruce Banner. These two were really at odds recently in Donny Cates' Hulk series, and their history has been a tumultuous one, with sometimes the Hulk or Bruce being painted as the villain and the other being painted as the hero. However, in reality, both Bruce Banner and the Hulk have acted as heroes before, and also acted as villains, and they've also even worked together before. In Immortal Hulk, they seem to find some sense of balance and harmony, but this didn't end up lasting too long, as Bruce then turns on the Hulk personas within himself, imprisoning the Hulk to use him as an engine for his space adventures. Odds are good, no matter how many times these two end up making peace with one another, that they will eventually always return to butting heads at some point. Number 5. Miss Marvel and Rogue. Back when Miss Marvel was none other than Carol Danvers, of course. These two women had a long-standing rivalry because of how much Rogue really messed Carol up. Rogue not only stole Carol's powers, but also left her comatose, and upon recovery without much of her memories and emotional connections to her memories. At the same time, this wasn't exactly a walk in the park for Rogue either, who also didn't much care for Carol, as Carol's own memories and psyche basically haunted Rogue as a result of their altercation. For a while, these two really did not like and even hated each other. The good news is Carol would actually have nothing to fear from Rogue now, as Rogue has much better control over her powers and doesn't really need to worry much anymore about accidentally draining someone's memories, life force energy, or even accidentally their powers. Number 4. Wolverine and Cyclops. Even more iconic than any other superhero rivalry involving Wolverine is probably the one between him and Cyclops. Now, you could chalk this one up to the fact that Logan is just hot-tempered at times and stubborn, and therefore he just, doesn't often get along well with others. But really, when it comes to these two, it's actually all about the approach to heroism and breaking rules versus playing by them, which oddly enough doesn't always mean that each person is always advocating for the same principle between those two, but they generally tend to be on opposite sides regardless. For example, if Wolverine is arguing that breaking the rules is the right play, then Slim is usually arguing against that, and vice versa. At the same time, their rivalry is also quite brotherly at times, and at the end of the day, probably a lot like Cap and Iron Man. These two men respect one another, and despite their infighting, often would consider the other a part of their family. Number 3. Superman and Shazam. One of the most iconic feuds in comics isn't necessarily a real narrative feud. I mean, these two don't typically go after one another to fight needlessly in terms of themselves as characters. They don't really have much of a reason to be jealous of the other or even dislike the other, but they do end up pitted against each other, often in alternate realities, and just because people like to see who would win if they got in a fight. And actually, their feud extends back in history to the creation of these characters, which were considered rivals in terms of them being with two different publishers at the time in comics. In most cases, because these two are so evenly matched, generally their fights end in either a standstill, a stalemate, or with Superman implied as the victor. While Superman might be weak to Shazam's magic, Shazam is often forced to transform back into Billy by Superman's tactics. So, number 2. X-Men and the Eternals. Though not all X-Men and not all Eternals are involved in this one. This feud is actually what sets up the Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals Judgment Day event. It all goes down because of the reveal to the world that mutants have the power to resurrect themselves, which is happening now in modern comics, essentially meaning that mutants have become immortal beings. Druig, who at the time is Prime Eternal, thinks this makes mutants far too powerful and labels them as deviants, which obviously deviants are the people that the Eternals must always fight against, which apparently isn't that much of a stretch either, because genetic-wise, mutants are similar enough to deviants for the deviants to successfully be able to use the gates on Krakoa. Labeling them as deviants means the Eternals go to war with the mutants, and of course, their premier superhero team, the X-Men. Hence, X-Men and Eternals fighting each other.